This meeting is being recorded.
Jesse, go ahead.
All right, we will go ahead and get started. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining webinar today, Winning Process Documentation and Succession Plans. Information discussed in the session represents the views of the individuals and does not constitute legal advice or the views of Alpine. You should consult with your organization's leadership and legal counsel as needed for your specific situations. And with that, go ahead. This is Jesse Parker. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at Alpine. And I'm going to give you a quick overview of what we're going to talk about today. A few questions here that hopefully will be answered. What does process documentation and succession planning have in common? How successful would a college football team be if they ignored the playbook and didn't care who played what position? I'm from the Minnesota area, so I actually know a couple football teams that might actually try that. Next one, how successful do you think you will be if your goals and processes are not embraced by your employees? And today we're going to kind of walk through how you can identify key players and train your team to utilize and improve your processes. So we've got two speakers today. We've got Dave Fredericks and Brenda Stoltz, both senior managing directors here at Alpine. Dave's got about 30 years in warehouse operations with focus on operational process, documentation, and training. Significant experience in WMS implementations and upgrades, certified Six Sigma Green Belt, and he is based out of Florida. Brenda, similar experience in supply chain operations across operational and HR processes, significant experience in establishing and maintaining leadership processes that drive staffing metric success, and she is based out of Indiana. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dave. Dave, take it away.
All right, thank you, Jesse. First of all, I want to talk about a playbook. What is a playbook and why is it important? It's basically a document that transforms strategy to action. It details the processes that will bring desired outcomes. It defines specific actions that addresses specific scenarios, and also it aligns positions to responsibilities. So what similarities do college bowl winners and successful businesses have? Number one, they have a path to success. Number two, they build and develop their teams. Number three, they will employ starters, special teams, and recruits, and they all play a role in the operation or organization. They will create a playbook to meet their needs, and they constantly analyze and improve.
Hey, Dave, as you transition to the next slide, if anybody has any questions as we go through this, feel free to go ahead and write those in the chat box, and we will take those down and address those at the end of the presentation.
Oh, thanks, Jesse.
Yep.
Your path to success, you need to take a good look at the 1, 3, and 5 year strategic goals. Are your goals clear and objectively measurable? Are the goals aligned to your corporate vision? Are you doing what you say you are all about? Do you have the right resources with the right knowledge? Do you have the right data and reporting capabilities? Comparing results to goals should not require much heavy lifting. So you want to start developing your roadmap, looking at staffing, infrastructure, and technology. We're going to talk more about staffing and processes in this one, but there's going to be a lot of discussion on your infrastructure and technology facilities. But really, where do I need, if I'm looking at my 1, 3, or 5 year mark, where do I need to be in 6 months to hit that 1 year mark? Where do I need to be in 2 years to hit the 3 year and 3 years to hit the 5? We can't wait until the 4th year to say, oh, we're going to miss our 5 year, but we've known that for 3 or 4 years at that point. So when we look at the organizational chart, did I skip one? No, sorry. Look at the organizational chart analysis. We need to review the existing structure. What changes in structure are needed and by when? What positions will be needed? What positions are becoming obsolete? And we need to evaluate the need of any vacancies. And we'll get into that in a little bit more.
Yeah, David, I think this is where you really try to translate, hey, so I have a 5-year plan, but in order to get to that 5-year plan and meet those goals, what is my team going to need to look like? And that analysis is really important to not only visualize what your team needs to look like in 1, 3, or 5 years from now, but also look at your current team and understand, are you pretty close to what your future team needs to look like, or are you going to have to do a lot of work to get there, right?
Absolutely. And that really gets into what this next slide is about, reviewing the strengths and weaknesses of your existing staff. What's it need to look like in the 1, 3, 5 years, as Brenda was talking about? You need to look at your direct labor. Do I need to add direct labor? Well, what about operational support? And if I'm really growing, my facilities maintenance, my transportation, my leadership team, how are they all going to stay current and keep the right number? What's the current salary to hourly ratios that you're operating with? And when you're adding labor, how much over or under to standard can you be tolerated? If you're running, let's say, one supervisor for 15 people and you got to double your staff, well, at some point you need to double your supervision. But when do you do that? At 20, at 25, at 30? How much bandwidth does that one supervisor have? And you don't want to overburden them and have them leave at a critical point. What positions will be needed? Now, this one, Brenda, you can help me out. An average time to hire by position and retention rate, those really come into play when you're looking at when I need to add, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And not only that, but you also got to think, what are you willing to buy versus grow is another consideration, right? So that's the advantage of looking at your plan, not in the next 6 months, but as far out as 5 years. And then you can really try to understand what are the skill sets that I know I have to buy. And so here's the budget associated with those. And then what are those skills that I know my team can grow internally on? And so when you start looking to fill those positions, to hire new people, you have to have that strategy set already so that you understand, hey, what it is that I'm looking to buy today? And then what are the skill sets or the potential that I'm buying, knowing what I'm going to need in the future, right? You can't go out and buy it all. I mean, you could, I guess, but strategically, it's really advantageous to bring people on and allow them to grow into certain positions as well, too.
Correct. So, and when we're looking at it, we talked about, if you've had vacancies, and I know during COVID, there's been a lot of labor shortages. So you've had some vacancies and you've been surviving. Maybe you have been surviving. So the need is, do I really need that position? Can I reallocate that resource to another area? So it's a great opportunity if you haven't filled a position to really analyze the need for that position. Do you have the right person in the right seat? Is there a right person for that seat? That's another question. If not, then what's your succession plan? We'll get into that in a minute. When you're looking at the existing staff, what's their existing knowledge versus the required knowledge of that position? They also need to be supportive of your goals and visions as well. If they're not, they're probably, even though they're capable of doing the job, they're probably not the right person for that seat. Is there anybody else in your company that's qualified for that seat as well? They might not be in your department, they might be in another department. High performance, high potential analysis.
People who have lost faith, potentially.
Placed.
Dave, are you there?
See who your people are.
There we go.
Hey, Dave.
Yes.
We lost you. We lost you for about a minute there. So
Yeah, my earbuds went out. I got to go on live. Sorry.
You can just back up just a bit, about a minute.
Okay. So I was talking about the 9 block. Did you hear that?
Which one?
The 9,
Yes.
okay. So yeah, so using the 9 block, it is very subjective, because unless you have great documentation on your reviews and KPI performances, it's really as subjective as, well, I think this person is high potential and high performance, so they'll go in the top right block. You do have to look, at the ones that are in the lower. They might be very good workers, but they're not going to be moving on. I call them like a career worker in that position. A number of them are okay, but too many are going to stifle upward mobility. If there's some good people under them, they're not going to be able to go through that position to gain. They're going to have to go on a lateral, which comes back to the succession plan. And Brenda, maybe you could add some value as to how a good succession plan looks and how it works.
Yeah, from a succession plan perspective, you just need to make sure that there's a plan for every role. And what that really means is that you strategically need to look at your overall organizational chart and say, so which are my entry level roles that I know that I can bring somebody from the outside and that I can train them to be effective in that position. And then which are other roles that I ideally want to use to train people for senior management level positions, right? So typically, let's take a distribution center as an example. You may have a lead position, right? You have your frontline employees, then you have a lead position, then you have supervisors and senior managers, right? Ideally, you want to have a mix of both internal and external talent across all of those positions. And so you want to look at your org chart and say, so if I have, call it 4 managers, I want to be able to hire 2 externally, and then I'm going to leave 2 positions for my leads, my supervisors to feel that they can promote within and they can gain additional knowledge, right? And it's good not only for your team and from a development standpoint, but it's also good for the overall team, right? Because it builds a stronger team. You don't want to bring all external talent that doesn't really understand, maybe some of the baggage that your team has, some of the cultural challenges they've been through, some of the reasons why they do the things they do. But you also don't want all internal talent that kind of says, nope, this is what we've always done, and this is what we're going to continue to do. We all know the value in diversity. And so you need to look at that when you look at your overall team as well, too, and have a succession plan that takes that into consideration. And then also have into consideration plan for movement, right? So now that you know what roles you want to, ideally keep for internal moves versus external, make sure that you're really well aligned and in tune as to when potential people might be moving on to a different role, when they might be leaving to a different position, or maybe going somewhere outside the company, and have a plan to replace those positions, especially if they're critical as well, too.
Very good. As you're going through and analyzing the professional and personal development needs of the people as well, you're looking at leadership. There, you have different levels that are going to require different type of development needs. For the leadership team, you might, it's supervisory or management training, maybe some time management training. You get to departmental. Are there any special training? Are there certifications needed? Individuals want to get degrees or certifications. And also, how are you going to do any cross training? Because that's a great way to get people interested in other areas of the company. They might, start finding their niche in another area, and they can start growing in that area too. So we started looking at, let's break our workforce down now, and then almost like the football teams do. You have your starters or your people that are doing the daily jobs. Do you have position descriptions for them? Are they up to date? Are they accurate? Are they, really good, listing of all their responsibilities? Areas of responsibilities. When you deploy your supervision throughout a warehouse, they have specific areas that they might be covering. They might be covering multi-facets through that area. And is that documented? Do they know what their expectations are, and do we know how to measure them in that? RACES, a responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed grid. Actually, that's a chart for every major process that lists those areas and who's responsible. It's a great way to break a whole process down to make certain you have it covered, and then that the people that are covering it are properly trained and for that position and that responsibility. And then performance metrics. Number one, are they aligned to the goals? We need them timely reported, and you're probably going to look at different levels of it. We might have a business, we might have a shift, we might have a departmental and an individual level performance metrics. So, critical that they're aligned to the goals, that they are objective, and they're easily measured. Special teams. This is where I look at more of a project team. It's basically a blend of subject matter experts and your high potentials. You're trying to get them into other areas of the country, see how they handle in a project environment, how they can grow, what type of internal mobility is there. There's lateral and there's vertical. We get cross training. When you put the team together, though, it's really who's the facilitator of this team, because that position is critical. Because when you bring a team together, especially when you got some SMEs and some high potentials, you have a lot of high attitudes there that need to be, if you bring them together right, they're great. If not, they can start getting a little on each other's nerves. When you start forming it, you're going to bring these people in, and you're going to say, okay, we're going to assign roles on this project to the people, and that might get some conflict going, the disagreement on the roles, or get some personality difference in there. That's where the facilitator needs to step in and bring this together and get this team to start gelling, so that they become very effective in working towards the common goal. Project teams can be very successful, but if mismanaged, they're not going to perform well, and nobody's going to want to join another one. So getting that right facilitator is critical to kick one off.
When I think special teams, is a great opportunity for us. You're working through your succession planning. You're identifying those individuals that have potential and are going to do more with your company. You can use these special teams as development opportunities for them.
Absolutely. And to that point, allow for the fact that somebody might start really excelling, and there's going to be a position open up for them, and somebody's going to grab them, and you have to replace them. That's good, because then you're known as providing good high-level people to other positions. Prospects. Recruiters need to understand the position they're hiring for. Come back up to that position description being accurate. With that position description, they know what to look for. And also understanding, what team are they going to be on? Where are they going? And so how are they going to fit in? Because we want them to feel included from day one on that team. So Brenda, I know you did in your past a lot of work with the recruiting and the labor force. And so, the short and long-term labor requirements. Why don't you tell us some of the, give us some advice here?
Yeah, I think that people don't realize just how long it can take to get a good recruit. So I think that's why succession plans are so important, because it can really take you 3 to 6 months to find someone or find a backfill for a position. And so if you know that there's a manager that's looking to do something else and you support them, and you might not know what role they're going to you for yet, though, you should already be recruiting for their replacement, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it takes, first of all, you have to have a really good job description to make sure that it's out there. But then after that, then your recruiter gets busy, they post a position, and then they probably have to interview, 100 candidates to bring you 5 or 10 that are going to fill the position, that are going to meet the requirements that you're looking for. They're going to be a good fit for the culture. And then you have to figure out, okay, is this the right time? Do the expectations align? So there's a lot of different steps involved there. And all I can say is just make sure that you are getting that job description right from the get-go, because that really sets expectations and alignments from the beginning. And then just get it to your recruiter as soon as possible.
Thanks. And I just want to add to that, the time from hire to full productivity. If you're talking a professional position that, they can come in, they already have the background in the area and they can adapt pretty well. But if you're bringing in somebody from the outside into a direct position, by the time they go through their training, if you have a 3 to 6 week training program, they come out of that, there might be at 95%, 90% productive. When are they going to be 100%? If that's 8 weeks, you have a productivity hit for 8 weeks that you need to cover elsewhere. So, if you're at full labor is, 20 people, you might have to be running at 22 people with heads to keep that productivity. It's a tough thing to defend to upper management, but when you look at the cost involved of lost productivity, it's paying for itself.
Yep, absolutely. Great point, Dave.
Creating the playbook now. We talked about it early on. Now we're coming back to it. We've talked about our teams and building the teams, but now we need to look at our processes. The process reviews. When was the last time you saw a process map of your operation? If you don't have one, it's time to develop it. And I'm not talking every individual step. I'm talking a high level. What's the process flow? A lot of times when you start, especially when you have multiple lanes that all come together and you start streamlining it, you can see, oh, wait a minute, why am I doing this step? Because that's really a wasted step. So you can start looking at where are the wasted steps and start cutting out the waste. Evaluate your work instructions, your standard operating procedures and training documentation. When were the last time they were updated? Is there an existing library to begin with? I've gone into a lot of different warehouses, and they might have, some people have really good documentation, others they have nothing and they're running on legacy knowledge. So it's a really an opportunity to get, is there a library? If not, let's get one going. And really the best way to do this is get a cross-functional team, going back to the project teams. And their job might be to review, update, and approve all operational SOPs, depending on where they're starting from, how long that project's going to be. But that's really the basis of your playbook. Once you have it, you can start teaching it. What are your training methodologies? Do you do classroom? Do you do online? Do you have on the job? Combination of all, which is probably the preferred. And that's in your existing ones. But the new hires, Brenda, can you talk to us about a good sound onboarding process?
Yeah, and from a new hire perspective, this is where you need to take in consideration the fact that you not only have to teach them how to be effective at the job, right? So if they're a receiver, they have to learn how to receive. If they're a picker, how do they actually pick? But on top of that, especially in today's environment where the labor market's so tough, you want to onboard them to your company. And so you want to make sure that you're taking into consideration the cultural training, right? That they feel included from the beginning, that you have a really good compliance training in place, safety training. There's a lot more training that goes into it to make sure that when they walk in, they feel like, oh, I understand what it means to be an Alpine employee. Not only do I understand and know how to do my job, but I also know who Alpine is, what they value, how to interact with my leaders, how to interact with my peers, how to fit in. And right from the beginning, you start to build that strong loyalty from an employee perspective. So don't just think about it from hey, let me bring them on and show them how to do this job. But instead, how do I bring this person in and really teach them how to be a good employee for us?
That's great. And when you're bringing the new hires in, are there any special training requirements that are needed? Are there local certifications that they have to have prior to starting? A lot of it, especially material handling equipment, what do you require? So there's going to be extra time involved there as well. And, refresher training. Oops, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say absolutely, depending on what position you're hiring for, but there are some very particular, for example, your mechanic positions, right? Ensuring that they have the proper safety and the proper knowledge is going to be really important. So an understanding of any specialty training is really important.
Mm-hmm. And refresher training, we need to schedule it in advance. It can't be, oh, by the way, we got to do a refresher training next month. It's got to be when you go through it, that 6 months later you have to go through it, a year later. It's tied to the position, the descriptions and performance reviews. And it's really, how often should it be is really a question of what the job type is. There's some, when you get into HACCP, when you get into other, regulated, positions that's dictated by the government, how often it has to be. If your processes are changing, it should be more frequently. If you have a pretty static process, not a bad idea to revisit once a year, just to keep everybody pointing in the same direction. If you do start seeing areas start to slip, that would be an indication that you might want to get in there and start doing some refresher training.
Yeah, and I think, Dave, that's also a great opportunity to just create a program where you're not only looking for refresher training, but you're also reviewing that documentation that we talked about, right?
That's
And
absolutely.
ensuring that, yeah, ensuring that your physical process still matches what you have documented.
Mhm. Yeah, that's there's another slide here. We get in a couple slides, we get into that a lot more. That's a really good point. Performance monitoring tools. What key facts and figures should be posted? And when they're posted, how do I know if they're red or green? Do I need to react from it? When it is red, reactions from leadership and staff should be automatic. It shouldn't take some meeting 3 weeks into it that, hey, why isn't anybody doing something about this? This number's been red for too long. Control plans. When you're designing a control plan, what a control plan basically does is say, okay, here's what the numbers we want to run at. When we start getting off, when we start falling short of it, and if we fall short for X number of periods in a row, the period could be daily, weekly, monthly, depending on how you're measuring it. We're going to have a specific person that's going to be taking charge to get that fixed, and they will be empowered to get it fixed. But the control plan should identify who that is, what level do they need to get involved, and then you're going to look at your different problem-solving approaches. You have a DMAIC, define, measure, analyze, improve, control. That's going to be a longer 3 to 4 to 5 month process where you're going to put a team together. That's solving a major problem. You have your daily, weekly Kaizen problem-solving approaches that really can look at a small area of the company. Maybe it's just part of a shift or part of a department, but how can we improve this one process there, and getting people involved to do that. From both of those events, you also see where you might need to change your procedures. And a continuous improvement program. If you don't have one, why not? Basically, it's taking the output of both the DMAIC and the Kaizen event and saying, how can I work better? How can I work better? Always looking at different areas that I can attack and improve. Managing the game. Now, the 5S program, there's a lot of jokes that go on in the warehouse about this. It's nothing more. It's a shadow board that doesn't have any brooms or shovels on it. But no, it's creating a culture. Properly run, it really, clean, orderly, really instills efficiencies and effectiveness. It's pretty simple. It's a sort, set in order, shine, standardize, sustain. It's got to be part of the culture. When you're looking at, you only have on hand what you need to do with your job for tools. You can find them easily. They're always in good working order, and they're standardized. If you have 4 receiving stations, they all should look alike with the same tools in it. And sustain is make it part of the culture. Any program you start, go ahead.
Oh, I think you were about to say exactly what I was going to say, Dave. Like, really, it is a cultural change. And like, if you decide that, yes, let's add 5S boards, like the most important thing is that you communicate. And then as a leader, you follow up and you hold your team accountable to leveraging those. Because the worst thing that you can do is you walk around and these 5S boards, you can see the outline, but there's absolutely nothing on them. And so that really just sends a message to your team about, are you really just doing this so you can, quote unquote, check a box, or do you truly see the value in it? And are you willing to support the team to get there?
Yes, absolutely. Brenda and I were both in a warehouse about 1.5 years ago where the corporate team, the quality improvement team, had sent down these directives that you had to do certain things, and the 5S program was one. You could tell it didn't go over well because there was like 4 or 5 empty shadow boxes. And it was just one question on it. It was just a roll of the eyes, and we're not there yet. Well, you have to go. You have to make part of your culture. It's not a destination.
You're right. It's constant, I will say, because I will say, being that I was a warehouse leader at one point too, I do understand that it can be difficult, right? But that really comes back to consistency. You can't just check the box and think that you're done. just staying on top of it is the biggest, most important thing.
It is, and it comes back to, the right person in the right seat is not just knowledgeable about the job, but they're supportive of the goals of the company. When you have that person there, they're going to see that, they're going to react to it. And that's really what makes that operation sing. Another good tool is the Gemba walk. Gemba basically is Japanese, I think, for something like sort of like scene of the crime, but it gets the management down to where everything happens. It's just not for the corner office folks either. It's like if you are managing, if you're supervising, you need to get out and walk the floor. You need to get feedback from the employees who are doing the job. Here's another real good spot where they're going to say, this new process that you put in place last week, it makes no sense at all. It doesn't work. You need that feedback. And if you get that feedback, do something about it. If you just say, yeah, go away, they're not going to give you feedback anymore. But, if they're really, really emphatic that this has to change, well, then encourage participation in the case out of them. Get them to be part of the solution. More people see that happening, more people are going to get involved, and it really gets the culture of that whole organization going to, and comes back to, they really, you almost have a self-sustaining continuous improvement plan then. So Brenda, give us a post-game analysis. What do you do to look back at the business?
Yeah, so I think it's really important, just like I'm sure any team, any good team anyways, right? As soon as they're done with the game, whether they won or lost, first thing that they're going to do is they're going to go back and review the tape, right? What went well, right? If they won, if you had a great quarter, then you really need to pause and identify, right? And understand like what went really well. Take the time to identify up and coming stars, right? Like who on your team just had an exceptional quarter and really added a lot of value, or like you really see the development, the growth paying off, and how do you make sure to pause and circle back and acknowledge? Or if they didn't, right, how do you make sure that you circle back and provide the proper training and development tools to make sure that they can do it well the next time? Identify the weak links, and not only like, hey, where did we have misses, but what's the actual root cause of the miss, right? Why is it that we don't have those 5S sports that are up on the board and our housekeeping is up to date? Do they not have the right tools? Do they not have the resources? Do we not have the right amount of staffing? And so that's why they're taking shortcuts. Like really identifying those root causes so that then you can put sustainable solutions in place is going to be really important, right? Now, ideally, and hopefully too, though, things are going well, and when things go well, this is where it's a natural tendency to maybe not slow down and not reflect just as much, right? I think when we lose, it's really easy to say, all right, let's go back to the drawing board, what went wrong. But it's equally as important when you win to acknowledge why you won and also celebrate the successes, right? Make sure that you're giving credit where credit is due, that you're giving those quick 5-5s, that you're stopping to make personal acknowledgement, and ensuring that you're really acknowledging those milestone events, because that's what's going to continue to drive that engagement of your team. And that's what's going to make it sustainable, right? If they feel like, well, we win every day and nothing gets said every day, maybe it's not that important, right? You don't want that message to be out there. You want to make sure that people truly feel like you acknowledge and you care. And that's really important too, have quarterly business reviews. So actually we just came back as a leadership team from an Alpine perspective. We had our quarterly business review the past 2 days. So just making sure that you take time to work on the business, right? And that you're really tracking how you're doing. Are we tracking towards our goal, right? Are we being mindful about our vision? Is the vision still the right vision? Do we need to revisit that? Do we need to do something differently? Is all really important. And you just need to build those routines in place, and then just hold yourself and your team accountable to make sure that you're coming back and that you're having those routines to really have that post-game analysis and execute on it.
That's great. And lastly is is complacency setting in. We need to stop complacency when you see it. And your supervisor, this has to be drilled into everybody, but definitely from the supervisor. The supervisors are really the ones out on the floor doing the, watching the job work. They're the ones that are really the key. And if complacency starts setting in somebody's area, you better address it really quick, because once it starts, it's like a cancer. It's going to spread, and then it's really difficult to come back. So, Monday morning quarterback. we've reviewed ideas for building and developing your team. I think we've talked about a lot of good areas to look at, and have mentioned some tools. And a copy of this document's going to be available for review anyway. So you can, if in case you missed something, you can definitely go back and look at it. We discussed the need for the right person in the right seat with a strong bench. It's your investment. If you're growing and you know you need to grow, you have to invest there. I've seen, I've been through a ton of startups in my career, and the ones that work really well, they have the right staffing. The ones that failed miserably were the ones where they waited until the last minute to bring on the staff. And as you can imagine, it was not pretty. We discussed how critical analysis centering on playbook and execution can create additional improvement projects. If people see, generally they want to see improvements in their job, and if they see something wrong, and allowing them to have the ability to speak to and say, hey, I think this is wrong, and having the ability, if that's the way it has to be, then we need to explain it, that here's the reasons why. You're right, it's probably not best here, but there's other implications involved that you weren't aware of. And lastly, did you follow your vision and your goals? Are you really doing, it's time to walk the walk. Are you doing that? So any questions? Do we have, Jesse, you're looking.
Yeah, we got a couple here. First one, when determining the potential, and I believe this was asked back in the employee analysis kind of discussion, when determining the potential, how do you measure? By matching to others in the department, or by matching to the expectations of the position?
Definitely the latter should be a given. There's, if you have good job descriptions and you have good metrics, and it's very easy to measure about that. But just doing the job, being able to do the job is one, but it's how are the interactions with other areas, other departments, and that's where bringing a cross-functional senior leadership team together to do this exercise, you're going to get other inputs that, yeah, they might be a great employee and hitting all their numbers, but they really don't care about anybody else. So it's getting that other, yes, the objective is good, but the subjective, if done right, is good too.
And I think a follow-up to that question, how do you stay uniform throughout the organization and the business?
I think one slide did the 5S, the culture, and the Gemba walks, to make certain, walking the, make sure it's time to walk the walk. You're talking well, but getting out there and seeing it with the management team, being available for feedback, talking one-on-one with the workers. When you see a general manager in a warehouse who does that, the culture sets, and it really works nice.
Yeah, I think a lot of the routines that we covered today, that's ultimately the goal, right? So if you think about having documentation, well, that's going to help you drive the consistency. Sitting down and having succession plans. When you sit down and you have a succession plan, and maybe I wasn't as clear about it, but you don't do it in a silo, meaning you don't tell your senior managers to run off and create a succession plan for your team. You should really be looking at it across the whole entire organization, right? Let's sit down for our building and make sure that we have a plan. And if so, you're doing it and you're discussing it with your peer group. And that's really what's driving the consistency across how you look at talent, how you develop talent, et cetera, right? Having those Gemba walks and everything that just Dave mentioned too continues to ensure that you are drumbeating that consistency and those expectations across the whole entire building.
Yeah, makes sense. Here's another one, and it's a little bit of the opposite of the one we just had. So the other one was around kind of recognizing potential, maybe high potentials. This one says, what do you do after you've written the expectations, communicated the expectations, and how do you handle employees who aren't on board with the game plan?
Well, there's a quick solution to that, but that's not the fairest one. Really, this is really where you come back to your job description, performance metrics come into play. If your job description is aligned to a standardized process and failures to follow the process are documented and reviewed to the employee, it's basically going to be a coach up or out situation. I go back to I emphasize the right person in the right seat and the high performance, high potential analysis. If it should not be a surprise. All of a sudden you push it out. If you're paying attention to your people, it shouldn't be a surprise that Johnny over there in the corner is not going to do it. But what can we do with that person? It's a coach up or out. Is there anything else, any other area in the company that they would be a good fit for? Tough questions to be asked, but if you let one person not follow the process and there's no repercussions, others will start. Why do I have to do all this? That person does it and they get away with it. I've seen that in a high volume facility where the quality is going downhill in one area and nobody does anything about it, and it's very difficult to get back. So you got to face it. It's coach up or out situation. Get your documentation, get your ducks in a row.
Makes sense. All right, we got two more, and I'm going to kind of ask them together. So and I know you've run into it many times, as many of us do. There's the challenge or the competition to improvement is status quo. And so what's wrong with just keeping status quo? And if you implement these, is there always a gain? Will you always see some sort of improvement?
We'll start with the second one. No, you're not always going to see it. You start a project, not every project is successful. Matter of fact, quite a few of them, if not properly run, are not going to make it, or they're not going to make they're not going to hit the goal. They might make a little improvement. But what is important is a good idea to keep good records as you're going through the project. Where have you been? What worked? What didn't? That way, number one, you don't repeat the same issue, and you learn from errors encountered. So maybe the next one's a little better. And I guess the gains, I would define the gains. A lot of them could be financial, but you could be looking for improved control, less risk, or some cultural improvement that's not going to bring a direct bottom line, but it's going to improve the overall health of the organization as well. At some point, you do need to look at other alternatives. If the gains aren't there, maybe you need to look at system upgrades or some technological leaps. The last one, what's wrong with status quo? Staying current really is actually falling behind. Historically, you're going to provide cost of living increases. When you do that, and if your sales or your margins haven't improved, your bottom line is going to erode. So when that keeps happening, you're actually going by, your margin starts eroding, you're going to have less money to invest. And you might be looking at, you need to upgrade the system. That might not bring instant savings, but if that current system is nearing the end of a serviceable life, you're going to have to. So, you need to look at where you are, especially with your competition, because if you have good, strong competition, they're not standing on their heels, they're going forward. So you really need to look at where can I improve? How do I improve all the time?
Makes sense. And that wraps up the questions that we had. So thank you everybody for joining today. I believe if you go to the next slide, we do have another webinar coming up, and this one's going to be around basically preparing your workforce, your labor force for peak season. What are the metrics that matter, and aligning the operations and human resource functions. You can get the details to all of these and upcoming webinars at alpinesupplychain.com. You can also connect with us there. If you have follow-on questions from this webinar, just connect with us from our website, and we will get back to you as soon as we can. Thank you very much for joining. Dave, Brenda, great job. Thank you for the presentation and the knowledge.
Thank you, Jesse.
We'll see you on the next webinar.
Thank you, Brenda.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks.